I stood there in the church, trembling. The words came out of my mouth like they were scripted, rehearsed for weeks. I do. It felt surreal, hollow, as though I were watching someone else through a glass pane. My lips moved, but the voice barely sounded like mine. It echoed to a cathedral, like a lie whispered too loudly. The stained glass windows burned with sunlight, casting colors across my face like confetti over a corpse. The man standing beside me, Mark, he was everything I thought I wanted, everything my family prayed for. Polished, kind, safe. He held my hand with the steadiness of someone who believed he'd won. And in many ways he had. But as his fingers curled around mine, I felt nothing but the cold slide of guilt. Because deep inside, something was missing. No, someone, a piece of me that had been carved out and left aching. A hunger that no amount of love or good intentions could quiet. Not even Mark's warmth could fill the hollow space that bore Ethan's name like a scar across my ribs. I'd married Mark because it was the right thing to do, the respectable choice, the expected move in a life choreographed by obligation. But my heart, it wasn't present. Not truly. It was elsewhere, lodged in a memory, still caught in the storm of a past I tried so hard to forget. It had been years, endless, aching years since I last saw Ethan, the only man who ever made me feel like I was on fire from the inside out. We were reckless then, bold, defiant. We lived like we'd never get caught, like the world would wait for us to figure it out. But reality wasn't patient. Life demanded choices, and I chose the path that promised approval. I chose silence. I chose safety. But there he was, standing just a few rows from the altar, his presence loud despite the hush of the pews. My lungs stalled. His smile, devastating and familiar, hooked something deep in me, and his eyes, still impossibly blue, still sharp enough to cut through every defense I'd built. I wasn't ready. I wasn't prepared for the tsunami he would stir within me. One glance, and everything I'd buried clawed its way to the surface. My palms began to sweat. My throat tightened. Long time no see, Ethan said, his voice low and smooth, like velvet over broken glass. The sound of it unhinged me. I tried to smile. God, I tried, but my lips twitched instead, trembling like they carried a truth I'd spent years denying. My heart was pounding, loud, angry, alive. My body betrayed me with its heat, the flush that crept up my neck, the sudden pull in my gut that screamed danger, want, remember. Yeah, it's been a while. I managed, the words catching on the edge of breathlessness. My voice cracked, not from emotion, but from everything I couldn't say. The air between us thickened. I could hear the choir finishing their final behind me, but it felt like background noise, irrelevant. The altar, the congregation, the vows, all of it faded under the weight of his gaze. It was supposed to be a casual reunion, a nod, a glance, a ghost passing by. But there was nothing casual about Ethan. Never had been. The moment our eyes met, something shifted. A jolt, sharp and electric. The kind of charge you feel just before a storm breaks. My skin prickled. My stomach twisted. I could still taste him in memory. Still feel the echo of his hands. The pull of his mouth. The heat of his defiance. And he was looking at me like he knew. Like he knew. Like he'd been waiting. And suddenly, I wasn't a groom standing at the altar. I was a liar, drenched in ceremony and laced-in vows, breaking apart the seams under the gaze of the only man I'd ever truly wanted. Nothing about this was casual. Nothing ever would be. After that, the night was supposed to be simple, a quiet reunion over drinks with old friends, the kind of evening where nostalgia softens everything, where the past feels like a distant story someone else lived. But I couldn't stop the way my mind kept circling back to him, to Ethan, His laughter reached me even across the noisy bar. It curled under my skin, threaded through my veins, pulled at something buried deep inside me. Every time he leaned back, eyes crinkling. Every time he ran a hand through his hair or leaned in to whisper something to someone, it felt like a memory resurrected, too alive, too dangerous. I kept stealing glances at him when I thought no one was looking. Quick flickers of attention that always lingered too long. I prayed he wouldn't notice. But more than that, I prayed I wouldn't crumble. Because the pull I felt, tight in my chest, aching in my throat, wasn't new. It was a feeling I'd spent years trying to drown. Then he looked at me, not a passing glance. A gaze, long, deliberate, full of unspoken things. And then he smiled. That smile, the one that used to undo me completely, the one that still had the power to weaken my knees and scatter my thoughts like broken glass. "You look good, you know," he said, with that maddening smirk, his voice low and teasing, like he already knew the effect he had on me. Better than I remember. I swallowed, hard. The heat hit me in a wave, rising from my neck to my ears, settling beneath my skin like a tremor. "Thanks," I muttered, though the word felt like sand in my mouth. Worthless, meaningless, because nothing really mattered in that moment except him and how close he was sitting, how the air between us had changed. We left the bar late. The streets were quieter now, the city's heartbeat slower, the world suspended in that in-between hour where nothing is quite real. The breeze hit my skin, sharp and sobering, but not enough to pull me back to my senses. Not enough to drown out the electricity, that buzz between us. We walked in silence, but it wasn't comfortable, it was loaded. Every step echoed with everything we hadn't said. Every glance felt like a question neither of us had the courage to ask. Then he stopped walking. "I never stopped thinking about you," Ethan said, just above a whisper, but the way the words crashed through me like thunder. I froze. My breath caught, stuck halfway between shock and longing. I turned to face him, already shaking my head, the panic rising. "Ethan, don't." But it was too late. He was there, suddenly there, and then his lips were on mine. No warning, no hesitation. Just fire. Years of denial combusting in a single, desperate kiss. His mouth moved over mine like he was trying to reclaim something, like he'd waited forever for this moment and couldn't hold back a second longer. I should have pulled away. I should have stopped him. I should have remembered Mark, remembered the vows, remember who I was now. But I didn't. I kissed him back. Hard. Needy. My hands found his hair, tugged him closer, and the taste of him was both familiar and brand new, like home after years of being lost. The world dropped away, and there was only this, him, and the way my body answered to his without question, without shame. We didn't make it far. Somewhere between the sidewalk and his apartment, I lost myself. By the time we stepped inside, the air was thick with heat and memory. He backed me into the wall, lips finding mine again as our hands fumbled with buttons and zippers. There was no time for hesitation, no time for guilt. Clothes hit the floor in frantic succession. His fingers grazed my skin, sending sparks racing through me. My shirt was half off when he paused, his breath coming hard. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, voice hoarse, his hand still at my waist. His eyes searched mine, not with cockiness, but with a flicker of fear, of hope. "I've never been more sure of anything," I whispered, and then I kissed him again, silencing whatever second thoughts he had. The room blurred. All I felt was skin, touch, breath, our bodies colliding in rhythm, in memory, in everything we'd ever been afraid to admit. His hands explored me like he was relearning a map he'd once memorized, desperate and trembling. The moan that escaped my lips wasn't just desire. It was release. Years of pretending, of silence, of forced smiles, cracked open and spilled onto his bedsheets. And when it was over, we lay tangled. Our legs knotted, the sheets twisted, our bodies slick with the aftermath of something too powerful to name. That's when reality crept back in, like cold fingers down my spine, like a church bell tolling too late. Mark, the wedding, the lie I'd just written into the pages of my life. The weight of it all came crashing down, crushing my chest, souring the air in my lungs. I stared up at the ceiling, and beside me, Ethan reached for my hand, but I wasn't there anymore. Guilt had found me, and it was already beginning to gnaw. What had I done? What had I thrown away? "You're still married," Ethan said, his voice quiet, almost as though he was reading my mind. I nodded, my throat tight. "I shouldn't have done this," I murmured. "I love him. I promised I'd be faithful." Ethan's hand reached out to cup my cheek, his touch gentle. "But you didn't feel it, did you?" he asked, his voice soft. "You didn't feel it with him the way you feel it with me." I swallowed hard, unable to answer him. The truth was too painful to admit. I woke up to an empty bed. The space beside me was cold, the sheets twisted and rumpled. Ethan was gone. I sat up, my head spinning, the events of the previous night flooding back with full force. I looked at my phone. No messages, no calls, nothing. It was as if he had disappeared, as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. I knew that what we'd shared, what we'd done, couldn't be undone. I got up and walked a window, staring out at the city below. My mind was a storm of emotions. Guilt, desire, love, confusion. And then I thought about Mark, about the vows I had made just weeks ago, those carefully spoken promises laced with hope and trembling sincerity. I remembered the way his eyes had lit up as I walked down the aisle, how his hands trembled when he slipped the ring on my finger. I had meant those words, hadn't I? I had meant them. But now, they felt like paper soaked in water, fragile, dissolving. How could I go back to him after what had happened? How could I look into his kind eyes, lie beside him in bed, kiss him goodnight, and pretend that nothing had changed when everything had? The guilt was a noose tightening with every breath. It coiled around me, merciless and suffocating. I could barely eat. Sleep was a stranger. Ethan's touch, his voice, our reckless night, it lingered like smoke on my skin. I couldn't stay silent anymore. The secret was eating me alive, burrowing into the softest parts of me. It was rotting my peace. I knew what the right thing was, even if it would shatter everything we'd built, even if it meant burning down the illusion of our happiness. I had to tell Mark. I had to look him in the eye and confess what I had done, even if it broke him, even if it broke me. When he came home that evening, I was already seated on the edge of the couch, hands clasped together so tightly my knuckles were white. The clock ticked too loudly. The world outside felt muted, as if it, too, was bracing for impact. He walked through the door, his tie loosened, weariness on his face. But when he saw me, he stopped. Something shifted in his eyes. He knew, maybe not the details, but he knew something was wrong. "What's going on?" he asked gently, his voice laced with concern, his brows pulling together. "Are you okay?" I opened my mouth, but the words tangled, heavy and raw. They scraped my throat as they fought to be spoken. How do you tell someone that you betrayed them? That the life you just started building together is already fractured? "Mark, My voice cracked, barely a whisper. "I made a mistake." He stepped closer, confused. "What kind of mistake?" "I don't know what to do," I said, tears welling up as a dam inside me cracked. I didn't plan for it to happen. It just did. He didn't speak, just stood there, watching me unravel. The silence stretched between us like a chasm, deep and wide. I was with Ethan. I said finally, my voice hollow, trembling. That night, after the bar, I didn't come straight home. The words were acid. They scorched my tongue. And the look on Mark's face as the truth settled, God, I'll never forget it. He staggered back slightly, as if a confession had struck him physically. He blinked, slowly, as though trying to wake himself from a nightmare. You what? My heart broke at the disbelief in his voice, at the hurt, the betrayal. He had trusted me, with his heart, his future, his faith in love. I didn't mean for it to happen. I choked, tears now spilling freely. But it did, and I don't know how to take it back. He turned away, his jaw tight, hands clenched at his sides. The room felt colder now, the space between us vast. And yet, even as I stared at the man I had promised to love and cherish, Ethan's face flickered through my mind. That kiss, that moment, that ache that had never truly gone away. I still felt it. I still wanted him. And I hated myself for it. Mark didn't say anything for a long time. And in that silence, I realized something cruel. He wasn't just grieving what I'd done. He was grieving us. The version of us that could never exist again. He deserved better. He deserved a woman who gave him everything. Not just the pieces left after a war she couldn't admit she still wanted to fight. But I was split in two, torn between the safety of what I had with Mark and the undeniable truth that my heart had never truly let go of Ethan. I had a choice to make. I could stay with Mark, honor my vows, live the rest of my life in quiet atonement, hoping that time might dull the pain, that routine might mask the emptiness. Or I could leave, walk away from the good man I had broken, from the life we had started, and chase after the one love that had haunted me for years. The love that still made my pulse race and my breath catch. But there was no easy answer. Not for me. Not for Mark. Not for Ethan. Because no matter what choice I made, someone would bleed. And I wasn't sure I could live with that either.